So, without further ado, I would like to welcome everyone. This is the webinar for TCRP Synthesis 123, Onboard Camera Applications for Buses. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. We are pleased to have as our presenter today, Barbara Thompson, Esquire. Barbara has 30 years public transit experience. She started as an analyst at MTA New York City Transit and worked her way through the ranks for over 14 years to Director of Business Planning in the Department of Subways and Assistant Chief Maintenance Officer in the Department of Buses. She has been consulting for the past 16 years and has worked on other TRB syntheses, and on projects throughout the country involving new technology implementation, sustainability, and new fare payment systems. Today's webinar consists of Barbara presenting her material, followed by a question and answer session at the end. You can participate in the discussion by using the chat pod located in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. I see that many of you have discovered that already. I will be monitoring this chat box throughout, and any questions you have while Barbara is speaking, I will save and we will address them at the end of her presentation. If you don't already have a copy of the handout, the presentation handout that was emailed to you, you can click on the handout document in the upper left corner, the top box, where it says handouts, or you can copy and paste the link in the notes box on the left-hand side of the screen. You can also email Andrea Lambert at andrealam@nti.rutgers.edu, and she will be happy to assist you. I will now turn the presentation over to Barbara.
Hi, everybody. I'm Barbara, and I've put together, with the help of a large team, TCRP Synthesis 123, Onboard Camera Applications for Buses. And as you can see on the first picture, there's a picture of a little camera in the corner. And I'm sure you guys have seen these, or if not on your buses, or in other facilities or in other buses. First thing I really want to say to everybody is thank you. These kinds of syntheses would not happen without mega support from the NTI, TRB, the topic panel, Andy Bada, Karen, Mei Chin, Tom, Alan, Brian, Sue, Joe Powell, my research assistants, and most importantly, the transit agencies such as SEPTA, Valley Regional Transit. And if I happen to miss your logo on there, I apologize. There were 32 who took care of who sent the surveys back to me, and I am very grateful for that. So what these syntheses do is really a state of the practice. It's a state of the practice of camera applications on buses. And our goal is to assist transit agencies of all sizes. We hope to assess current policies, and we identified successful actions. So basically we looked at, well, what's working? How the surveillance systems are used to improve operations, safety, security, training, customer satisfaction. We can have all kinds of great, wonderful ideas, but if it's not working, there's no point in putting it out there. So this is a hands-on synthesis with actually what is happening. So to get into the study, the research, we had a methodology. We did a literature review, we put out an electronic survey, and also we went into in-depth interviews with certain agencies that had particularly interesting stories and interest in helping out. And we also looked at, after we got the surveys back, we looked at the results, the challenges and lessons learned, the case examples, conclusions, and then future research, because as you do this research, it always leads into more research. So our methodology basically is a lit review. We did an electronic survey. We put the survey out to 40 agencies, 32 responded with our 80% required rate to get back. We looked at all sizes of fleets throughout the country, size that ranged from 1 to 100. We even had one fleet with about 10 buses, 101 to 500, 501 to 1,000, 1,001 to 1,500, and 1,500 plus. I just tried in this. This is not any exact small, medium, or large thing the way they do like with airports, as much as we wanted to try and group them together as to what we believed were small, medium, large, and maybe medium large. So if you see the graph on the side, you can see they're pretty consistent in the results, with the exception that maybe we have a few more of the 101 to 500 size fleets. Then SEPTA and MBTA were particularly helpful in their in-depth responses. There were other agencies who were very helpful too in the study. There were LA Metro, New York City Transit, and Valley Transit. So there were a lot of agencies that came through for us. Basically, we looked at 32 agencies, and they were across the country. They were, as you can see in the map, they ranged from the most northern to the southern, and I do regret, though, that we don't have any in the middle of the state. I would have liked that more, but this is how it ended up working out. However, we do have the different sizes. So what our literature review does, the literature really provides context for today. It brings us up to where we are with camera applications. If we think about it, or we go back in our brains back to pre-9/11, it was a different world in so many ways, including technologically. Pre-9/11, people were concerned about security. A number of transit agencies were concerned about liability issues, accidents that were happening on the buses, making sure, seeing there was video to see if there were legitimate claims or not, safety of the customers and the bus operators. But there were also barriers. There were a lot more barriers then. There were costs, there were maintenance requirements, and also people thought about privacy concerns then. Can we really watch what people are doing? It was a different world, and the case law, the law was new on that at the time, new-ish. It was all allowed. It was all legitimate. However, people worried about it because we weren't comfortable with it. So anyway, 9/11 happens, as we all know, and it changed our world. And as APTA, Greg Hull, from the Director of Operations and Safety and Security Programs at APTA, said, as soon as that happened, within a couple of days, among the first things that were undertaken were financial resources being put into place by the FTA for vulnerability assessments to aid transit systems in refining their security plans and tightening up any aspects that needed to be addressed. Following that, 10 years later, 2011, we go back and we look again, and more things happened. There was the 2004 Madrid bombing, where close to 200 people were killed. In London, 52 people were killed. There was Congressional Research Service and Prieto testimony in Massachusetts. Prieto was the research director for the Homeland Security Partnership Initiative, and he worked at the Kennedy School of Government, and he testified that transit is truly at risk. It's a frequent target, and that it's really a great target for mass casualties. While we think about airplanes, because of 9/11, the transit system is packed to capacity most days. Then also what happened was there's wireless equipment. Federal grants came into play, as we see from the APTA comments. And then the buses are starting to be sold with equipment installed. Something else that was really helpful for the camera applications was the story with the London bombings. Was when that happened on the trains, they were able to arrest the bombers pretty quickly because they caught them on cameras. They could figure out where they went into the stations and what stations they left from, and that helped tremendously with the investigation and caught them and secured the system very quickly. So as we go into the research, we look at the fact that the agency starting equipping buses with cameras as early as 1990, and some as recently as 2014. I remember some of the early ones back in 1990. SEPTA in particular was putting cameras on buses because there were a lot of liability claims or lawsuits. There were a lot of torts claims, injuries on buses after accidents, and they would find that maybe 10 people were on the bus at the time of the accident, but there were 90 claims. And this was a way of ensuring who was on, who was legitimately hurt, who wasn't hurt, and keeping things in line so that it was a workable situation, and the people who deserved actions were given actions and so forth. Then as recently as 2014, others were getting on board, and that was with new bus purchases typically. Retrofitting did become popular, and 91% of the agencies we surveyed, 91% of those 32, actually have retrofitted buses with cameras. That's what we were doing back in 1996-97 at New York City Transit. And now, in general, new buses are purchased with cameras. So, what percentage of the fleet have cameras on them now? Well, more than half of the ones surveyed are 100% equipped. Then, with the exception of just less than 10%, they have less than 50% of the buses equipped of their fleets, and then the rest is in the middle range, but you can see that it's really climbing toward 100%. So what are these camera functions? There are safety purposes, accident insurance claims, investigations, training, and even passenger counting. And where are the bus cameras located? 100% of those with cameras are on the interior of the bus, and 80% of those with cameras are on the exterior. And when are these videos available? Well, I shouldn't say video. I should say, yeah, I guess video. Available in real time and typically reviewed when there's an incident. I stumble over the word video because my kids always correct me over the words tapes and videos. So we are on videos. What triggers review? What triggers review of the images? Typically there's an operator report, there's a customer report, there's an incident or an accident, there's a periodic audit sometimes, and then there's another one could be something where I was working on once in a project at SEPTA was there was an equipment failure, and we wanted to see if we could see what was happening with this equipment as people were getting on and off, and that worked out well. As people get into this, as the agencies got into putting the cameras on the buses, they were concerned about policy, as they should have been. So what were their policies that they were taught, they worked on? Mostly they were concerned about policies addressing the safety of the bus operator and the customer, policies in practice on how and when surveillance is allowed, and standard operating procedures for the cameras. Some of the policy examples we came up with, or that people offered to us, were the cameras were for use in investigation into security or criminal investigations, incidents involving vehicle accidents, and/or potential for claims of injury or damage to property. Another policy that some of the agencies have is surveillance signs on the bus must be posted in both English and Spanish. The MBTA, the T up in Boston, has a pretty substantial policy where it says the MBTA surveillance policy provides the backbone for the organization. Everything's associated with the camera and their services there. Where the cameras help them with service, it helps them with incidents, it helps them with everything. So they have a detailed management policy that includes the retention rates of videos, how video is stored, who has access depending on the operational need, how to request copies of video, who downloads the video, and how the video is downloaded. And all of this results in knowing what video is available and provided a strict chain of custody, which I'll define later, so that it can be used for civil claims and criminal evidence. This was, I found most interesting, is the purposes, motivations for installing cameras on the bus. I see that everybody's first one, we looked at what was very significant, and somewhat significant. And so with these rated ways, you can see that it was very significant that the agencies were concerned about bus operator safety and protection. Next were accident and insurance claims. Customer safety ranks up there. Deter criminal activity with vandalism and graffiti. Part of a security strategy, part of an agency-wide plan. Bus operator performance is farther down. Technology availability. Bus operator training. Bus operators, workers' comp issues, fare evasion concerns, part of a citywide security strategy, others, and passenger counting. Now the benefits. When we asked them what the benefits were after they put their systems in and they've lived with them for a while, it came up in a very similar way. So you can say that their goals were achieved. Benefits for accident and insurance claims. That actually became a little bit more significant as a benefit than the bus operator safety and protection, but just a teeny bit so in a subjective way. Customer safety, deterring criminal activity, security, and I can read through the list. However, on the next page, what I like is comparing the motivators with the benefits. Customer safety turned out to be number one, along with bus operator safety and protection. The accident claims became very high, and you can see how they were very consistent with their motivators versus benefits, and felt as though their money was well spent and the objectives were taken care of. So now that we had the cameras on these buses, where were they? On the interior, all the buses had interior cameras. All the agencies had cameras that were on the interior of the buses. They had a minimum of 2 per bus, but the majority had even more than 6 per bus. On the exterior, not only, but 80% of them had cameras. So then we get into what kind of buses we have and where are the cameras, and we try to get a sense of, the interior views for the one-door bus. And those tend to be the smaller ones, often the handicapped available or smaller dial-a-ride services and so forth. Their views came out pretty consistent too. They were from the operator's view forward, the fare box and the front door, the rear door, but not every bus had a rear door, from the rear of the bus facing forward, and then they had 5 of the agencies actually had them focused on the bus operator. And then we looked at 2- and 3-door buses. We grouped them together because they tend to be the more transit buses. They're the ones out on the road with regular service day in, day out. And their views were consistent with their motivations to install. If you look at it, you can see that their focus primarily was on the fare box and the front door and the rear door. Those are big safety places for people getting on and off the bus. We don't want to see people hurt. That's really an important place for bus operators. Another place that was very important too was from the panel behind the operator facing rear, from the operator view forward, from the rear of the bus facing forward. And then once again, we actually had some agencies who focused on the operator. I know that's a bit controversial, but that's the case. And then for those articulated buses, about half of them had midpoint, had a camera in the midpoint in that articulating joint on the bus. And here's a view. I don't know if your eyes can see it. It's pretty grainy. It's from the MTA, and it shows the bus, the camera view from the front door in the fare box. You can see a woman walking forward, and you can see a woman walking back. So what are some of the exterior views? Typically, they're on the passenger side. Some were on the operator side, the rear of the bus, and the front of the bus. The exterior views for the 2- and 3-door buses, once again, the passenger side, the operator side, the rear of the bus, and the front of the bus. So basically, they're really trying to get all of the areas of the buses. And the one exception in the questionable area is whether or not the operator is on camera or not. So the equipment that's used. Now this study did not get into which camera brands, what the specifications are, so forth. This was to really just give an idea of what the type of technologies are out there. Mainly, they're using DVR equipment on the bus, which is eventually downloaded. Then there's wireless cellular modems, audio surveillance, wireless radio, and then other equipment. Now, other equipment can be the very old ones where we used to have cameras on the buses, and then it would download onto a disk, and the disk would have to be taken off, and then it would be put into security and saved if there were an incident. So how long are videos stored on the bus? That really varied. You can see that 20% were a week to a month. I'm sorry, 20 of the agencies were a week to a month, and others ranged from 24 hours or less, 24 to 72 hours, and then some varied. The reason some varied is because they would be taken off or taken care of if there was an incident. So if there was no incident, it may have stayed on the bus for longer. Now, one of the other things that happens is this is just video storage on the bus. Once an incident is recorded and there's some sort of emergency or an accident or there's a reason to investigate, the video is often put on, is then saved electronically for whatever that criminal period is, criminal or investigative or tort period. For example, if there's an accident, it would be saved in Philadelphia for 2 years because that's how long the statute of limitations is. So who has access to manage these images? The transit agency, or who has access to the images at all? The transit agency security does, the bus department management, transit agency management, legal claims departments, bus maintainers. This is safety department, looks like E-department, but it's department. Video security administrators and bus operators don't have access to the images themselves. So then also, with all this technology out there, things are linked to each other. They're on systems. They're integrated. The information comes off the bus at the end of the day and taking the whole health of the bus, including all the maintenance items and also video images. So other things that are integrated with these cameras are GPS, average speeds of the bus, the G-force, the vitals of the bus, the routes, the farebox connection, and then there are some other things too. But basically, the cameras aren't any good unless they're actually working. So one of the great things about this technology is most of the cameras are self-diagnosing, and that's continuous. They also will check the cameras during inspections. Who maintains this is the bus maintainers predominantly. In some places it's outside contractors, and in some places, as back in when this was written a couple of years ago now, it was a number of them were under warranty, so that's who took care of them. But how were they taken care of? They were folded into the preventive maintenance programs. There are daily reports that come out because the vitals of the bus would include perhaps the camera equipment. And then it was also bus maintainers were trained to take care of the systems. Sometimes it's just an R&R, repair and replace, and sometimes it's a call-in for warranty. So one of the big legal concerns is the chain of custody of the videos. The chain of custody is very important because without a proper chain of custody, the evidence in the video is not able to be used as evidence in court. So what that chain of custody means is the chronological documentation or paper trail showing the seizure, perhaps when it was downloaded, when it was taken, custody, control, transfer, analysis, and disposition of physical or electronic evidence. And this is an important issue when you're choosing your technology, because when, you know, I think back to 1997 when I was working on this in New York, and it was all new and exciting, but it was a real pain in the neck because it was inconvenient. We'd have to learn if there was an incident, and the bus operator would have to inform them, the management as they came in, the supervisors as they came in. Message would have to come up, and the process was somebody would have to go out physically to the bus to retrieve the images on a drive, those whole old floppy drives we used to have, and then bring it in and hope that during the time that we retrieved it in time, because I think they were written over every 24 to 36 hours. So if something happened on a weekend, it could be problematic, or the message might not have gotten through. And it was really hard to manage. But the chain of custody, and we couldn't do anything without a proper chain of custody. Apart from the legal issues, we had labor relation issues. And as I mentioned before, that's cameras focused on the operators. TriMet actually out in Portland installed cameras because of a complaint of a bus operator reading while driving. And so there are pros and cons to focusing cameras on buses. The pros are the obvious ones, the safety for the operator and the customer. The cons are stress on the operator being watched, unfair discipline that wouldn't have been picked up otherwise, and pretty much what I've found happening among the policies is that some agencies, they permit the cameras on the driver, but no discipline is allowed based on the cameras. So but that's a tough one. So that's something that's still out there, and arbitration is sorting through. But nevertheless, there are cameras on buses, and they are focusing them on operators. So who does? A little less than half monitor the drivers. Most prohibit, and 6 allow disciplining resulting from the monitoring, but most include union reps and policy development. So the surveillance policy for Valley Transit out in Washington State is that they put on the cameras on the buses for security, safety, and supervisory purposes. The employer reserves the right to install and operate video and audio recording systems in all Valley Transit vehicles and facilities. The audio records shall not be used for the purpose of Valley Transit disciplinary action unless related to the commission of an illegal act by the employee. So this is an example of a policy and how they use both sides of it. They can audio, and you'll hear the bus driver, but it can't be used for discipline unless there is an illegal act. Something to consider, though, even though the cameras may not be pointing at the bus drivers or the bus operators, every rider has a phone. TriMet bus driver, these are some of the headlines that I caught over while doing the research. TriMet bus driver reads his Kindle while behind the wheel. Now I mentioned that's when they started putting the cameras in and actually focusing on the bus operators. That was back in 2010. That arbitration has gone through, and the courts have given kind of a divided opinion on that. What I mean by divided is, can they do it? Yes. What can it be used for is questionable. Just recently, last week, a Metro bus driver was suspended after video shows him reading the newspaper while driving. In New Jersey, a second New Jersey Transit bus driver was disciplined for reading while driving. Another one was Ryder's film bus driver reading while driving with no hands. And so people are having, nobody wants the bus operator to be unsafe, but even if the camera is not on the bus operator, people have to remember that every rider has a phone and is videotaping everything nowadays. So some of the things, though, that we needed, that they actually use cameras for is for training, and there are some training applications. And that's to help bus drivers develop safer, more efficient driving habits. 27 of the 32 use videos to train bus operators. 17 of them use them for accident prevention. 16 use them for customer service. And 1 presents awards for accident avoidance. So the financial impacts. The agencies are very happy typically with the financial impacts. They find there's a reduction in accident claims and payouts, fewer workers' comp claims, and then they found that fewer grievances are submitted to labor relations. Maybe they don't feel they have the video to back it up, and situations are taped, so people may think twice before doing something questionable, but at the same time, the video is very helpful if there was a wrong, and it's very helpful for making the case black and white. So anyway, the costs, though, when we talk about the financial impacts, they were very positive. However, the cost to install these video cameras is really unclear. In cases, it's part of the bus build. In some places, they're a retrofit. Some of the installations occurred over 10 years ago, so they didn't have that information. And so one of the things we found was when people estimated, the cost varied from the bus type and whether retrofit, and the information was all over the board, and they ranged from $2,700 to $18,000 per bus. So I don't know, that's something that really requires more research if we want to get into what the cost is. So one of the challenges, though, all agencies felt out there was that there was a cost to install, there was employee and union acceptance, equipment reliability, and these are all challenges that go into management, keeping on top of it and coming up with policies and actually working with the unions to get things done. So these are the specific challenges by what they believed were very significant to somewhat significant. The cost, the lack of union support, unreliable technology, other priorities within the agency. People just couldn't get a champion, couldn't find somebody to take it on. Lack of public support. Executive management wasn't for it. Line management wasn't for it. Lack of police support. Because if there isn't police support during a criminal situation, then the transit agency is left dead in its tracks on that one. I can actually give a little story about that where back in New York when we had the chain of custody issue, getting the video off the bus, and then by the time we were able to get the police involved, it was a week later, and it lost all its fury, and the police officer at the time was just disenchanted with it and didn't feel it was really worth the problem of trying to fetch somebody out on the graffiti issue. There was a graffiti issue on the bus, and that was really what the purpose of New York City Transit's buses were at the time. We were having a big trouble with window scratching, not so much graffiti, but scratching of the windows. So we had all the cameras placed so that the video would pick up on who was scratching. And these weren't considered as high a crimes, perhaps, as an assault on a bus driver or an assault on a passenger. So that was what we mean by police interaction and police support. One of the funny things that happened, too, not so funny, is one of the buses picked up some kids at a school, and one of the kids took his whiteout out and actually just painted right over the camera, but we could see him from the other camera doing the job. But that, once again, it's not instantaneous. This is a couple of days later when we realize it. We can get the tape. I could see the tape, but it just wasn't worth pursuing it by that time. It lost its fire, and time is very important in these issues. So another issue or other challenges that the agencies have is maintaining older equipment, maintaining more than one type of equipment at the same time, and then replacing the obsolete equipment. When do they make that switch? How long do they keep the old technology and then make the switch to new technology so that the policies can be consistent, they can keep up the standard operating procedures, they can be trained on the cameras and so forth. And I think we have those problems with all equipment. So it's very typical of any equipment that you have on a bus, whether you make that switch to what kind of brakes or to cameras or wheelchair lifts. So that's a challenge, but it's consistent with the other challenges that transit agencies face. So how did they overcome some of those issues we just discussed? The cost. There was federal grant funding post 9/11. They also found that there was a return on investment. In particular, SEPTA received a huge Homeland Security grant and installed a system for $50 million. And their belief is they've saved more than $40 million annually in claims and litigations, and that number keeps going down because there are fewer claims and litigations resulting from accidents. And also, the key for them was that their program was managed by the Video and Evidence Intel Center within the Office of the General Counsel. All of this happens with SEPTA in the legal department because that's where it was inspired. They actually have one of the challenges, way to overcome the challenges when agencies get executive support and also with union acceptance, which comes once again with working closer with the laborers unions. And then customer complaints were unfounded. And I can give an example of a customer complaint unfounded. One of the agencies would pick up a handicapped girl every morning. Excuse me if I'm not using the right language, but she had Down syndrome, and she would get on the bus with her mom. Her mom would put her on the school bus. Not on the school bus. She put her on the transit bus to go to school. She'd get on, get in her seat. Her mother would wave goodbye, and she'd go. She'd do that. She was doing that for months. Then one day, she goes to the bus by herself. She gets on the bus, and she comes home from school and tells her mother that the bus driver was making fun of her for her disability. He was mean to her. He called her names. And so the mother calls into the bus garage and says, "This is happening to my daughter. What's going on?" So she does this the next day, and they said, "Well, we had the same bus driver on. Let's see what's going on." The next day, the same thing happens. She gets on. Well, you go to the video, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. There was everything when she got on the bus. It was effortless. She took her seat and moved on. Well, what happened is the girl's mother told us later that really the girl didn't want to go to school. So this got the bus driver out of trouble. So it was the customer complaint was unfounded. So it can help, as well as a lot of people or a lot of unions believe that it's really against policy and it's unfair. So other challenges that have been overcome were maintenance. The preventive maintenance always improves performance. No matter what system you're looking at on a bus or anything, preventive maintenance improves performance of the cameras. Nowadays, cameras are equipment self-diagnosis. The standardized equipment is easier to maintain. Bus transit agencies have good relationship with the vendors who help them. Some of the agencies really like to sole source this, which I understand the pros and cons of sole sourcing, that sometimes it's more expensive, but they know what they're getting and they want the exact cameras they want. And also what's happened is technology improvements and advancement, and that's come with time. For example, there's improved bandwidth, which has allowed for system not to shut down, but in one place it came with a price for increased network and server costs. So some of the lessons learned, and the lessons learned are pretty widespread, but in particular, cameras are an important, vital tool for the security of employers and riders. And that should be employees and riders as well. Communication is key for managing, training, and developing policies. And the agencies recommend using the most current, clearest images and maximize installations, don't minimize. So in this case, more is better. As an MBTA example, the T up in Boston talks about how one of the lessons learned, which has been very helpful for them, is they have immediate access to video on board buses in the event of an emergency. There's instant access to nearby buses for responding officers for better preparedness. There's quicker and easier investigations. They result in quicker and easier investigations for criminal activity or claims. There's improved bus driver and passenger safety throughout the fleet. There's a deterrence of vandalism and random acts of violence because people see the cameras. And then it really provides enhanced investigation abilities for increased citywide safety. For example, in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia City Police depend tremendously on SEPTA video for many of their criminal investigations because they just don't have the proliferation of video that SEPTA has. So, continuing with the lessons learned, and I'm saying the same things but in different ways. The onboard camera applications have agency-wide impact and have become invaluable. It's important to standardize the systems on the bus. High-definition cameras are most cost-effective. Maximize the number of cameras. Find a system that's easy to use and reliable. Work with the union as much as possible for buy-in, and it's necessary to dedicate staff to review video. So our conclusions. Basically, the agencies are using similar technology throughout the country. The DVRs, the camera applications have led to financial benefits. They've changed the way transit agencies do business. They've improved operator and customer safety. They've decreased the cost of legal claims, and so, as SEPTA says, it pays for itself. And they've integrated cameras into other operations. Going forward, where do we go with all this information now? The technology can be hard to manage. It changes quickly, and the equipment becomes obsolete. Cameras are expensive, but the return on investment and security grants help counter that. And then there's future research that we always come up with as we go through these things. What does it cost to install these cameras? Is it worth retrofitting? What are some of the funding sources for new technology besides these FTA grants? What is the most effective practices of automatic vehicle maintenance systems on the bus? You know, is it best, you know, what automatic checking of the bus vitals is best? And that's associated with the cameras as one of the pieces of equipment. Are there camera specification recommendations for the bus fleets? Should there be a standard throughout the country? One of the things that really has to be done, in particular for fleets that just started installing in 2014, is incorporating the new technologies into bus maintenance practices. And then, as with transit agencies, as many of you on the phone probably also have rail fleets. So what are the onboard electronic surveillance technologies on rail fleets? So with that, I say thank you, and I have my information there. If you ever want to contact me and ask me some more detailed information, I'm happy to work with you. And meanwhile, I guess there's is the chat box working, Lori?
The chat is working. I couldn't get the captioning transcript to work. They're going to add it after the fact and before I upload the presentation onto YouTube. So I apologize to everyone if you needed the captioning right now. It was supposed to be there, and it will be in place in the future. So if anybody has any questions, you can type it in the chat box. I'm going to back up and read some questions that appeared earlier. I jotted down the slide at which they occurred for context. The first, excuse me. The first question was around slide 17. It was from Wayne Henderson, and it says, is there a federal retention policy for the video?
Is there? No. There is and there isn't. No. What it comes down to is, I'm just going back to slide 17 and see if I can see more of the context of that. I'm sorry.
Oh, you could use the jump thing.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And now it's going back too far.
That's okay.
I'm sorry I made everybody dizzy there. And I have it on full screen, so.
You can only see that, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone sees you on the screen.
Okay. So the retention policy, there isn't a federal standard that we're aware of. That tends to be state to state. It's new, and the recommendation is to keep it through the statute of limitations in your state if it's a questionable incident.
Okay, there was a part 2 from Ron Pavlik. to the retention policy, he was wondering about best practices or recommendations, if anybody had those in place.
What I like, I can tell you what I happen to like, and what I think is the best practice is when the video is automatically, it's either instantaneously sent to the agency or that it's, and then it's all downloaded regularly as it automatically as it comes through at the end of the day, typically at the depot when they check all the vitals and they get the video off of the DVRs.
Okay, I see.
I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm happy to talk offline with anybody.
Okay, that was from, Wayne Henderson thanked us for answering his question, and that second part was from Ron Pavlik. Around slide 18, which is where we are, Susan Newbrough asked, are we required to post a video surveillance sign on buses with video systems?
Are you required? Not necessarily, but it's recommended.
So that would be sort of a best practice recommendation to
include
the sign. But,
yes.
Around slide 21, there was a question, but I wasn't sure if it was being posed to you or to the other people who were chatting. I think it was to other people because it was asking if anyone was doing something. So that was from Sean Messick. If you do have another question, you could put it in the chat box. I think the other questions I got, excuse me, sorry. I think they were asking each other questions, and if I'm wrong, that was Jawan, Jasper, Dale Withers, and David Mayer. If you weren't speaking to each other and you want to ask Barbara a question, you can jump in the chat box and let me know. Then I think there's some new ones coming in, but there was one more I had copied earlier. It was from David. I don't know if it's not. Has there been any issues where video surveillance was dismissed because the camera software and other transit software showed different time or GPS data? I don't know if that was part of the conversation.
That is one I don't know the answer to. I don't know. I could contact, we could easily contact an agency and ask them about it. MBTA would have that issue probably. And I think that goes back into evidence if you have competing videos as to what the real, what the right one is. But we can find out from a couple of agencies whether they've actually had that issue or not.
Okay. I'm scrolling back through the questions here. Okay. It's hard to tell sometimes whether they're talking to each other or they have the question for you. They were talking about subpoenas. Amy Cherone asked, and I think this is towards the end, so I don't have a slide number. You talked about one of the challenges being lack of public support. Can you explain what that means a little bit more, or what the agency told you about that?
Oh, what happens there is there used to be groups back in the day who did not want to have anybody videoed. They didn't feel it was anybody's business what was going on with other people. They felt as though it was a personal privacy concern. That was as much as I was able to get out of the agency on that, because I really didn't get it. I didn't feel that was a real clear answer, even though that was a response. So I think that is less troublesome now than it was back in the day and back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble deciphering. Aaron Cowell asked if most video systems for buses also include audio, but again, I'm not sure if that was for the other people chatting or if that was for you, Barbara. But
a lot do. And then, but what's interesting is audio was fussier in some states than videos.
They were concentrating on that more, or
they wouldn't allow audio wasn't allowed to be used as evidence, but video would be. For example, that was in the Valley Transit policy. They wouldn't use audio unless, because they felt it was privacy of conversations.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Philip Maxfield wanted to know if there was a best practice for minimum amount of cameras, I guess, being used at one time.
The best practice is the more the better. More than 6 on a regular standard bus, on a 2-door or 3-door bus.
Peter Bromley asked, do you know if any agencies have used facial recognition technology to flag, for instance, frequent fare evaders or identify out-of-place articles left behind on buses?
No, I don't know about that. I don't know, but I think that people are working on it, but I don't know if it's been installed anywhere.
Okay. Carissa Nichols wants to know if you have any advice for an agency that is looking into finally getting cameras but is facing resistance from staff members.
Yeah, that's a problem. When you talk about staff members, those were some of the challenges. Those were what I recommend is that you need a champion at the executive level to help you go through that. And this is the executive level, somebody who would really benefit from it. Or unfortunately, what's happened in practice is often it's a bad incident that brings it forward. If there's, in New York, for example, a bus driver was beat up, and that brought up all kinds of issues. If we couldn't see it because it wasn't on the video, because the person actually was in the seat, toward the seat of the bus driver. That's one way. But the other way I recommend is to look at it as a and this may be a better, more civilized approach, which is look at it from the legal claims perspective and the SEPTA example. And if you look at the SEPTA example in the study, and I'm happy to help coordinate any questions with that, particularly with SEPTA, on how they were able to do it they did it from a legal perspective, and that, most executives and top of the agencies are interested in saving money, and that was, that's my advice, is the saving money and hope that the cameras are installed before there's any bad incident.
Okay, thanks. There's another question about best practices or sample policy on how to administer a camera program, addressing such issues as when they are to be reviewed and how to use for discipline, etc.
MBTA has some on that. I'd have to go into the depths of that with particular agencies. It said best practices, right? Though. Yeah, they're all different, but they're the same. But the ones who are very happy with their results, MBTA is very happy with their results, and SEPTA is very happy with their results. So I would try and get copies of them, and I can help do that. I may even have them, but they might be dated now because the study was actually, I collected my information a couple of years ago. But I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to try and get those policies, and typically they're very happy to share them.
With other agencies? With
other agencies, yeah. They're very proud of their work, and they should be. And if MTBTA or SEPTA is on the phone, just let me know, and I'll work with another agency.
There's two questions that are kind of together. Chris Usher is looking for resources listing recommended equipment in the industry. They apparently have some cameras that have a terrible user interface, and looking not to repeat the poor experience.
Yeah.
And then a similar line is, how long does it take for the equipment to become outdated versus standard?
That's a hard question. How long does equipment become outdated? It's like your laptop. How long does that become outdated where you feel the need to get a new one or a new phone?
Because it depends on the user.
It depends. Well, it depends. It depends on what was purchased, how new the equipment is, and how much. Yeah, and with the user, how much do you expect out of it? The agencies, like I worked most closely on the study with SEPTA and MBTA, and they were very happy. They're very happy with their actual equipment and MDTA is too. So I would use their standards. I don't know the brands. I just know that they're very happy with the clarity of the pictures and how they're able to access the information. But once again, I'm willing to, if somebody wants to call me and needs to have contacts at these places, I'll gladly make introductions and conference call in with them.
That's very nice of you to offer. A lot of the questions actually are along those lines. They want someone to speak at, to request a copy of their samples. Yeah, everybody's very interested in the the ones obviously that are happiest with their program.
Yes, a lot are very happy with their programs. They're very happy. New York's very happy with their cameras. SEPTA, MBTA, and LA Metro's happy with their cameras. They're at a newer phase, though. The ones who, I didn't put any brand names into this study because I didn't want to seem like I was promoting anybody. But we can do, if we want to do a little outreach and make contacts with these agencies, that's great. Sometimes APTA will have recommendations on those things, but I don't know at various conferences. But I would stick with finding out through MBTA, SEPTA, and LA. And TriMet's very happy with theirs. Valley Transit is. So if you have a connection with those places, or if you need a connection, I'll gladly make that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people want to know recommendations for systems to install, types of storage, DVR and NVR. People are asking questions like that, and it sounds like...
Yeah, that was beyond the scope of this, but right. I'm happy to help get to the next stage.
That's awesome. All right. I'm just reading. The questions are kind of streaming. Okay, they're talking about public records. It's hard. Camera system being... Jonathan Kemp wanted to, I'm guessing this is for you, wanted to know of any camera systems that are being exploited in the cyber realm and any trends identified from that.
I'm not aware of that. I don't know.
Okay, let's see. There's another question here. This is from Mike Toole. Mike Toole's asking about standard frames per second of videos.
I don't know the answers to that. That was because we were talking about the applications, not the actual equipment itself. That was one of the further research questions.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm out of water. I think there was some other chats that came up. Hold on a second. Of course, I'm having a coughing fit while I'm talking to 200 people.
Of course.
I have a really bad tickle in my throat right now. Someone told me to ignore their last question. Let me go back to the main chat. I was getting sort of separate. Any application of forward-facing cameras used for ticketing auto drivers for violations?
No, not yet. That's a big union issue. No.
Oh, that's why the sigh.
Yeah.
The heavy sigh for the union issue.
Yeah. Yeah, union issue. It's really unfavorable. That's really now you said ticketing, right? Was the question there has been discipline?
Yeah, it's from Grant Engel. It says it's the last one. I don't know if you can see the chat box. Any application of forward-facing cameras used for ticketing auto drivers for violations? Not bus operators, car drivers in front of
No, I think it's a good idea, but no, not that I'm aware of. And it's very helpful. What happens with those forward driving things, as we talked about before, some of those videos are used for driver training. Like here was a close call. This is how the driver handled it.
Oh, okay. but they're not used to.
No, they don't have that authorization. It's not like red light cameras.
Right. Yeah, I guess that was where they were going with that. That was actually the last question in the chat box. So anybody else, if you have a question, now would be the time to ask it, or we're going to wrap it up here. Oh, someone's typing. Let's see. There's a bunch of people. Oh, people are just saying thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's very hard to do this blind, but I hope it went well, and I hope people have questions, and I hope they feel free to contact me. If they send me an email, just put the put NTI in the box, in the subject line, so that I know not to ignore you as one of my friend's kids' parents trying to tell me my kid's in trouble or something. But just let me know, and I really love this. So please feel free to contact me.
We can tell, absolutely. Okay, so thank you. I want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. A special thank you to you, Barbara, for your informative presentation.
You're welcome, and thank you, Lori, for being so helpful.
Thank you.
And you were all very polite, and you all were really polite listeners. Nobody interrupted me while I was speaking.
They couldn't.
Yes.
We have them on lockdown.
All right. Thanks.
I just want to, thanks. A quick reminder to everybody, I'll be sending an email asking you to fill out an evaluation for this webinar. Please fill it out. It helps NTI and me moving forward, scheduling new webinars, figuring out what worked, what didn't work. Again, sorry about the captions, technical issues, nothing I can do. And I guess keep checking the NTI website for upcoming webinar offerings. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye, thanks.